Welcome back to the channel. We're playing 20 questions with
SBRE Brown, which is me. And
is
I'm a
you.
person, I do all kinds of things in life, but I review fountain pens, for example, and that's probably why I'm here today.
Yeah, and you've been doing it for a very long time. You've been doing it for 13 years on the internet.
Yes, tell me about it. And it feels like a lifetime, but that's right. It's been quite a while.
So let's get into the questions. When I say fountain pen, what pen do you think of?
I tend to think of something that's iconic, but also that I don't necessarily have. So, for example, Montblanc 149, Pelikan M1000. These are pens that have been around for a long time that people recognize the look of. They're not my pens, but I think of something like that.
All right. How did you get into pens?
Through indoctrination, because I grew up in the Netherlands and we learned how to write when we're about 6 in school, and then the next year you graduate from a pencil to a fountain pen, and those are, at least when I was a kid, which is a while ago. But anyway, they were supplied by the school. I don't have that pen anymore, but they were fairly cheap pens made by a Dutch company called Bruinzeel, now Sakura Bruinzeel, I think. And that was really not a great pen, but that's when it started. Then I've kind of used them on and off for a couple of years. And then around 2010, actually exactly 2010, I got more into it again.
So, what was the first pen you bought when you got back into it?
The first pen I bought was this pen.
Ooh,
This is yeah, it looks like a candy cane, and
it does.
it's a. I still think it's very pretty. It's a Visconti Opera Elements, and it stood out to me for a couple of reasons. One was it had a gold nib. It was the first pen I had with a solid gold nib. It's made of celluloid, if I remember correctly, at least some sort of celluloid-like material. And it's a very nice writer. And I really wonder what would have happened if it would have been a terrible writer, because maybe then I would have just thrown it out and never touched fountain pens again. So I mean, good thing it wrote.
Good thing the
Visconti.
Visconti wrote.
Yeah, because they're so reliable. Yeah.
Especially in the 2010s.
Well, yes, exactly. So
Yeah.
it's no, but yeah, no, been lovely, and that's really been the start of it all.
Right. What's your current daily driver?
Well, that really depends on, I think, what the context is and what my mood is. Because sometimes I like something very ostentatious, like say, Lambrou pens LB6 is it's a nice big pen. It's very bright red, or something else that is like something like this. This happens to also be Visconti, but this is a Speakeasy, which is also a lovely pen.
Okay.
Very nice celluloid, but sometimes I find myself in situations where I don't want to use something mainly in work situations that is too eye catching, um, and then I may use something that's more toned down. Like for example, I think that my own SBRE brown pen is a bit more toned down because it looks quite dark, but up close it has kind of like it has things in gold and patterns and it's brown obviously,
Of
but
course.
it looks a bit from a distance. It looks a bit more like, I mean, which of these two things stands out more? So I mean, that's kind of the reasoning.
All right.
Depends.
Depends. What's your favorite ink?
Well, SBRE Brown is certainly a very nice ink, I would say, and I do use it. Really, that is an ink that I always have in a pen, and that is largely because I really like my ink. I think I'm obviously the most biased person on earth, but I mean, I think it turned out really nicely
Are
because
you
it's a
gonna
very
make
nice
me have to
warm.
track down a bottle of your ink?
Oh yeah, I can easily, because it's still fully on sale. So we shall speak. But
Fabulous.
it's a very, in my mind, a very nice warm shade of brown. So I really like that. But beyond that, there obviously are many other, because it sounds like I only care about my own stuff, which is not true. As far as people know. So there are other things that I do, like Waterman ink. Maybe not the most inspired range of colors, but it's very reliable, washes out easily. Mont Blanc ink I actually like a lot. So
Oh, I love Mont Blanc ink.
Yeah,
clearly.
it's really. I think they're really nice colors. I mean, some of the corn poppy red is just beautiful shaded red. The lavender purple is really nice. Irish green's cool. So yeah, nice,
Yep.
nice things.
What's your favorite brand of either pens or ink?
Well, ink we just kind of covered. So I think Waterman. I don't have that many inks, but I mean, I like Waterman. I like Mont Blanc. I like Diamine. Diamine made my ink. I've never really had issues with those brands. So I think those are all solid brands. If you force me to pick one, then I I guess it might be Diamine because it's such a wide range of colors. As to pens, I find it really difficult to choose. But if I'm gonna pick, then I'm going to pick this one. I'll try to not be too wishy washy. Here you go, Yardeled. Yardeled is in the UK,
Yeah,
solid silver pens. This is a Victorian finish. There are 3,000 hammer strikes in it, placed by hand. I mean, I think that's pretty awesome. It looks vintage, but it is not. It's modern made. It's bound by tradition and all kinds of wonderful things, and it's a lovely writer too. So I think that is a brand, a smaller brand, but that people sometimes overlook. Expensive pens, but you get an enormous amount of quality for that, in my mind.
that pen has been on my Grail list for a very long time.
Uh,
Even
you
just to
should
see one in person, because I've seen them in videos. I've yet to see one in person.
I live in Red Deer. Come over, and you can use mine. It's no problem. But
Sure.
you should. And what the first thing that'll stand out is the weight, because the weight of the solid silver is something you really feel. It feels special.
The next time I end up in Alberta, I'm gonna
Yeah,
end up over at your house,
I'm
right?
here, man. I mean, show up, and it's show hands. Yeah,
Fantastic. Vintage or modern?
always modern for me. And I have dabbled a bit in the past in vintage, and I fully respect the tradition of vintage pens. And I just told you before we
Yep.
started, I had Doug Rathbun here over
Hmm.
for lunch, in Inquiring Minds. He's much more into vintage pens, although he likes modern too. And we had a very good discussion about it because there is much more emotion, character attached to vintage pens because they've been around for decades and all kinds of people have used them, sometimes generations. It's much harder to find that in modern pens. However, I'm a very pragmatic person. I use my pens, so I'm always nervous about vintage pens being more fragile. Often they're a bit smaller. I know there are exceptions, but I mean, look at my face and then look at my hand. I mean, I don't use small pens very comfortably. So modern for
Right.
me.
You have a small ink collection, but of the inks you have, do you swatch them all?
Absolutely not, because I can't be bothered. But also because I don't have that many, I know what they are and I know what they look like, and I fully respect people who have full systems and swatches, and I've seen it unfold in people, and I think it's fantastic. But I don't really have the patience. Plus, I would have, I don't know, 15 swatches or something, and I don't know if that's really necessary. But I appreciate it in people who do because it's awesome to see.
Right. Do you daily drive the same ink and pen combination in any pens?
Often, yes, I find that often I have figured out what pen works with what ink, and then I stick to it. And sometimes it's out of necessity, like this pen I've shown you before. If you don't put a red ink in this, it's weird. It just looks weird. So there are certain pens that only drink certain inks. There are other pens where I'm a bit more flexible, but often I find the combination that I like best. Then I also associate that pen with that ink, and then I can't switch anymore.
Shockingly similar.
Nice. Yeah.
Do you keep all the writing samples you do for videos so you know what nibs look like on certain pens, or do you just like get rid of them when you're done a video?
Well, I use both sides of the paper because I find that it's wasteful enough as is. But having said that, then once both sides are done, I've taken the pictures for the website. I incinerate them all. Sometimes because I never want to be reminded of all my crap and all that stuff, but also sometimes because most of the pens I get sent are only lent to me. I
Yeah.
don't actually get to keep them, so there's no real point in keeping all that. But if someone believes that they would offer me vast sums of money for old writing samples, then by all means let me know and I shall see what I can do.
Fair enough. What's a pen you wish you could see in person?
Yardled Millennium. That really is one pen I have never seen in real life. There were two versions. In a nutshell, it was made for the Millennium, obviously, hence the name,
Yeah.
stating the obvious. But that's my specialization. It's a Yardled pen, solid silver, deeply fluted barrel. It apparently is quite large. It comes in a massive wooden box with velvet and stuff. It looks absolutely beautiful, but I've never seen one in real life. And they're also um, it's like it's a month's salary. These are very expensive pens, but they look really cool.
Yeah. I think anything Yardled does looks really cool.
Yeah, I agree.
What's your current grail?
Probably a Yardled Millennium because I think I really I'm in a extremely fortunate and privileged position because I've been able to use so many fountain pens because companies lend me stuff or send me stuff.
Yeah.
Things that I've been able to use at pen shows or pen club meetings. I really don't think it's an exaggeration when I say that I have used well over 1,000 different pens, and that is wonderful. The downside to that is it takes quite a lot to blow you away at some point. And that's not said in any arrogance or whatever, but I mean, at some point, oh yeah, it's another black pen with gold trim. Yeah, it's cigar shape. Yeah, it's cartridge converter. Yeah, all right. So at some point, it needs to be quite special to really stop me in my tracks. And again, Yardled Millennium. Um, I have only seen pictures, but it looks very appealing.
What's the pen you would recommend to a beginner?
I would get something from a smaller pen company because those kinds of
Oh,
companies are willing to help you set things up. So I just had to clear things a bit. I'll show you two here. This is a Desiderata Pens Sobriquet made by my friend Pierre Miller. He
okay.
makes small batches of pens. It's fantastic. I find the material very attractive, but obviously that's very subjective. It's a very nice writer. It has a cool filling system. And I think it's really nice. Or take something else like this Edison, for example. This is a Collier Grande. I don't know why I put it in French, but a Collier Grande. It's likewise a smaller pen company, and the advantages of such a company that once upon a time I completely shattered an Edison cap because I dropped it, then stepped on it, which apparently was not rated for. And I contacted Brian Gray and I said, I'm terribly sorry, but can you make me another cap and just tell me what I owe you? He did, and he sent me two or three, and he said, figure out which one fits best, send me back the rest. I did that, returned two. I said, what do I owe you? He said, nothing. And I said, yeah, but I don't want to not pay because I'm a pen reviewer and that kind of
Mhm.
stuff. And he said, no, but I would not charge anyone because I want you to be happy with my product. So if this happens, I'll do it. I mean, that was user error. Now, if you were to try that with, say, a Mont Blanc, I would probably say, okay, well, it's $5,000 for a new cap because we have to figure all this stuff out. We don't really care. So you just send everything in there, we'll see what we can do. So a small company can really help you get acquainted with what you're doing. And I think the service that you will get will help you understand what you have and how to use it. And they will make sure that you're happy, which is something big companies do. And I'm not trying to pick on Mont Blanc, by the way, but just that these big
No,
companies would be
it's
different.
yeah. No, I also think you're the first person in this entire series to suggest a small pen company.
Because if you don't
And I have
support,
sat down with so many people for these, and no one
but
else has said a small pen company.
because think about what you do. I mean, really, if Mont Blanc is your thing, or Pelican, or
Yeah.
Parker, or Waterman, like any of these big companies, of course that's your thing. That's awesome. But think about the craftsmanship that goes into making pens and what small companies do and what they can achieve, but also the effort they put in their product, which I think some larger companies don't always do. Visconti writing nibs. So that is something to take into account. I'm also not picking on Visconti. I just showed you two, but
Yeah.
I mean, like that
Yeah.
small companies have
Small
fun.
company. What ink would you recommend to a beginner?
Did you ever hear the tragedy of SBRE Brown? It's a very nice ink that writes very, very pleasantly. But in all seriousness, I would not recommend that. Simply because the international shipping can be high, and it's obviously really the only ink you need. But having said that, I think there are other options that are much better. I would, though not inspired, I would stick with a washable blue at first until you are fully comfortable filling your pen and not getting the ink on your clothes or elsewhere. I would use washable blues and something like Waterman Serenity Blue, beautiful color, darker than a lot of washable blues. Behaves really well, so you don't have to deal with feathering and that kind of stuff. And it's not even that expensive either. So that's what I would recommend.
All right. What advice would you have for somebody wanting to try out a fountain pen who might be a bit intimidated by them?
You can't discover interesting new things if you're not willing to take a certain level of risk. So you have to take a bit of a risk. Now, that doesn't mean save up $5,000, buy 1 out of 10 limited edition or artsproof. That makes no sense. But I mean, your first car typically is also not a Lamborghini or something like that. So don't do that, but start with something simple. If that means going on eBay or AliExpress or sites like that, buy a $20 pen from China, see how you like that. It's fine. Or if that's too exotic, too difficult to navigate, get a Lamy Safari. See what happens. Buy something inexpensive. See if it's for you. And if it is, that's great. And if it's not, there's something wrong with you because fountain pens are great. But having said that, that's okay. And if it's not for you, then it's not for you, and that's perfectly fine. But then you have not lost a lot of money. You've got to be able to take a little bit of a risk and start simple. If that means cartridges, do cartridges. Doesn't matter. Nobody should look down on that.
Yep. What filling mechanism do you think is most interesting, regardless of if you like to use it or not?
I really like the Con Ed filling system, which is very expensive. But I mean, just the way this works, well, then you screw this end, and then you do that, and then you do this, and then you do that. I think that's really neat. And then you screw the whole thing back together, and then it works like that. I think that's very neat. It's not affordable and it's not accessible, but it is a really neat filling system.
Yeah, it's fun.
It's fun. Yeah, it's fun. And I
Yeah.
mean, it's a lot more fun than, oh, it's a cartridge converter. Well, that sounds like incredible fun. You just twist it and then the thing comes up. I mean, it's a bit more exotic, and I think that's nice. Although cartridge converters are very easy to clean, children.
They are so easy to clean. What nib size do you prefer to write with?
Had you asked me this 5 years ago, I would have said broad. And if you were to ask me now, I would still say broad, actually. But I would qualify it a little bit. But it depends on the situation. If you're at the post office and you have to fill out a form, you should probably use a ballpoint anyway. But then like a triple broad nib is really not the solution. So I like broad nibs because they're so expressive and they add character to your writing and they're so smooth. But a good fine nib or a good medium nib, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But would you like threaten to take my review license away and say we have there's one thing that you can pick? Then I would say a broad nib.
Where are you getting a triple broad nib? Out of curiosity.
Doesn't exist that much anymore. Pelican used to do triple broads, and the triple broad on the M1000 was spectacular because it was like writing with a Sharpie. In all honesty, it was incredibly wide. These days, Scribo still makes them.
Okay.
Montblanc makes the oblique triple broads
Okay.
still, so it exists, but it is quite rare. Even double broad is getting rarer and rarer.
Yeah.
But yeah, triple broad is it's
I've
rare. There
got
wasn't much market.
I've got a double broad, but
Or
it's not
what pen?
a Kaweco Sport. But
Oh,
even then,
nice.
it's
Yeah.
not as broad as my Eco broad.
No, and
The
that's
Eco is
that's
broader.
that's one of the things that I find very puzzling and confusing. What we really need is standards. It would be really nice if companies would all agree and say, okay, a broad is zero point 0.3 millimeters, whatever, like
Yeah.
something like that. And we don't have that. So there is such variation because a Scribo triple broad, again, that is a Sharpie. But I have on this fascinating instrument. This is a 3D printed pen that William Shakur made to me. It's very
Okay.
large. There is a double broad titanium nib, and it writes like some broads I have. So it's very confusing.
Uh,
Standards.
yes, standards. I'm
Make
also
it happen. You're in power. You're the future. You're young. Make it happen.
sure.
Yeah.
Honestly, the fact that I can buy fine liners that across the board have standard nib
Yeah.
sizes, and I can't.
I don't understand, but also what pisses me off is that even within a brand, they can't maintain standards. Like I have used at some point, I was sent some sort of Lamy Safari
Yeah,
fine, and it wrote like a broad. And I mean, it didn't write like a broad for another brand. No, it wrote like a Lamy Safari broad. So I mean, if you can't even do it within your own brand, what the hell
there's
do you
a
expect
problem.
from me,
Yeah,
bastards?
no,
Anyway,
yeah.
fine, fine.
I think the only ones that I've had that have ridden not like how I expected were I got two Kaweco Sports that were supposed to be fines, and both of them wrote like they were needle points, and I was like, this wasn't what I wanted, but
Yeah. No, Kaweco is another good example of that. If
yeah,
like they sometimes they really nail it, and if you
yeah,
have a really good Kaweco like double broad or something, it can be a lot of fun. But I've also seen that go horribly awry and have really over polished nibs that would skip insanely.
yeah.
Yeah,
No, I've got a great medium from them that's was really well tuned right out of the box, and then I've got a
yeah.
great double broad. Um, but my broad is no more broad than my medium is.
No, exactly. And that's what that's what I was talking about, or what I was trying to suggest. Like with this one, it's a titanium double
Yeah.
broad, but I know you have no context whatsoever. Um, I mean, it writes like this. It's really not particularly broad. In some
No, it's
brands,
not.
this would be medium. So I like it. It's really nice. It's very juicy. It's a very pleasant writer. But I mean,
Yeah.
don't tell me this is a double broad. It's not a double broad.
It's not
Anyway,
a double
that's fine.
broad. It's like maybe a medium.
Yes, exactly. That was really weird.
All right. 3 questions left. Um, is there a style of nib you love or find interesting but would never actually use?
Well, I don't know about never actually used, but here's another pen. This is another classic pen. This is the LB5, and this has a Nagahara cross point. Mr. Nagahara, the famous nibmeister of Sailor, made this. It's a stack nib. It's two nibs on top of each other.
Yeah.
And from how I understood it, this was really meant for Asian style calligraphy, which I cannot do. It's a beautiful pen. It's a fantastic writer. But speaking of broads, this would be something like a triple or quadruple broad. It's incredibly broad. And the problem is you have to write incredibly largely. So I would say like font size 20 if it was a computer. And so for handwriting in Western script, it's really not ideal. And it's a little bit like an architect nib in the way it performs.
Okay.
I like it, but for everyday writing, it's difficult for me to use, and yet I like it. So anyway, but so something architecty. I do cursive writing, so architects are typically not that suited.
I write in cursive as well, and my architect is only ever used for like printing titles.
Exactly,
Like when I want
exactly.
to differentiate a page or break up bullet points, I use an architect.
And great for that,
Yeah.
but not the cursive.
No. Architects and cursive do not work. Um, do you always use the same paper? If so, what paper?
I use what I'm given. So most of my writing in non-video style, but actual real life writing is done at work, and I tend to use the paper that is available there. So whatever I can find in the office supply closet, I use. And recently, we've made a change to sustainable earth sugarcane paper, which I think I just did a review on, and if not, it's coming up soon. And that was actually surprisingly fountain pen friendly for a relatively lightweight, and that's really quite nice. So I'm kind of into the sugarcane paper right now. I know that people sort of fetishize Japanese papers and are really, really, really excited about specific Japanese papers. I'm not particularly so. To each their own. It's just that, especially with the Tomoe River, that super thin feel that freaks me out a bit. I just don't really like it very much, and I don't know why. But that's probably just because I'm insane. But anyway, so it's not that. But then the classics, Rhodia, Clairefontaine, lovely papers used many times. Oxford, that's really cheap but also really good. So what I can get.
Fair enough. And same. Uh,
Nice.
do you have a least favorite ink or ink color family?
There was a time that when I kind of started with fountain pens, that I bought every ink in the regular Geoban lineup. So not their 1670s
Okay.
that they weren't out yet, but the regular, the little sort of flat bottles with the pen holder on it. And I developed a profound hatred for Bouton d'Or, which is a stunning shade of yellow. It's beautiful and intense, but you cannot read it. So you put that on any white paper, and you cannot read back a single word that you wrote, which in my mind kind of defeats the purpose of a fountain pen ink. So I guess if you're an artist, it could be different. But even a triple broad nib wouldn't help that one. So I find in general, um, if an ink is illegible, I hate it. If it's too light, if it's too washed out, I don't like it. And here's another thing: shimmer ink. I hate shimmer ink passionately because I don't see the point. And I get it if you're sort of artistic and you're
Yeah.
doing cool things, but I guess I'm not cool then because I just don't like it. The fact that there is some sort of particle floating around in my ink freaks me out a bit, to be honest. And I just don't like it. I don't like the look of it. I don't like the way it behaves on the paper. I don't want to be in the same room as shimmer ink. So that's a fairly profound statement for your 20 questions. But having said that, I don't like it. Shading inks, I love. The more shading, the better. Shimmer is another thing. There was the shimmer, the sheen, sheening inks.
Sheen.
But everybody, at some point, everybody had to
Yeah.
have sheening inks, and I, I find that often those start harder in pens. They can make pens harder to start, especially when there's sort of like a reddish sheen. What's the point? I don't get it. So I guess maybe I'm just too boring, and that befits my status as someone about to turn 40 and becoming an old man. But anyway, so there is that. Not that old, but I just don't like these kinds of fancy thing. I just want an ink, and I feel that I'm asking for the bare minimum here. I want an ink that I can put in a pen and can read back what I just wrote. Then I'm happy.
Fair enough. It, yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, it's not that much to ask for, is it? Like,
No.
why would someone? Can you imagine that at some point in time, there was a person, probably a man, let's be fair, at Jeoban, who woke up and he thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make an ink that is so light that nobody in the world will be able to read back what they wrote. That's my life's mission. And then he did all these concoctions and he came up with all these different formulations. And then finally he found something and he thought, now that's completely legible. That's my life's work. This is what I wanted. That morning I woke up like that. And I don't fully get it. But there we are.
No, I've thought about getting a bottle of it just to use in color mixing, but I don't use yellow ink. The closest to a yellow ink I have is the Pelikan highlighter ink.
Yeah, but that serves a function.
It
That
does.
has a purpose.
That has a
What I would do,
purpose.
if I was you, I would buy the Gerber ink anyway, and then throw it out. And then you've done the world a big service. Straight out of the package into the bin. No further discussion. Done.
No ink swatching video needed.
Well, it doesn't matter whether you swatch it because you can't see it. So you may as well. It's like the chameleon of inks. It's like, oh, what is that? Oh, it's ink. Oh, is it really? Or is it just a white sheet of paper? I don't know because I can't read it.
You know, you're
So
just making this color more appealing, right?
after this video gets up on your channel, like it's just sales of Bouton d'Or going to spike and people are going to be like, why the hell is everyone buying this ink? It's so useless. Now you know why.
Now you know why. Now people will know. Well, thanks
I
for
mean,
playing
give it a shot. If you really want to waste your time, it's a great way to do it.
I'll see if I can find it in one of the little bottles.
Yeah, that would be yeah, the probably best way to do it.
Yeah. Well, thanks for playing 20 questions.
Oh, you're very welcome. This was a lot of fun.
I'm glad you've enjoyed it.
Yeah, I hope you don't regret asking me because you got some interesting answers. But there we are.